We really wanted to kind of start showing the evolution of ape culture.
Feathers are the hardest thing.
They're wickedly tough.
Well, it's a good thing you don't have a bunch of feathers in this movie.
I know, it sure is.
I mean, that frame right there is one of the greatest visual effects achievements in history. For something like this, what kind of scale are we looking at?
44 petabytes worth of data. It's just... Yeah.
Oh. Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of Visual Effects Artist React, because today, what a wonderful day.
What a wonderful day!
Today we are joined by Erik Winquist. Erik is a visual effects supervisor from the legendary Weta FX and led the team on the newest entry of the Planet of the Apes saga, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
I was involved with the first Avatar, all the Planet of the Apes. I work with brilliant people every day.
Well, we're gonna be looking at Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. We just saw it last night. It's a great movie. But more than that, the visual effects are incredible. So, for Kingdom, you are the overall VFX supervisor on it. No more Don Lemon? Dan Lemon? Dang it, I said the wrong name.
Don Lemon from CNN is actually a VFX supervisor.
Dan Lemon.
Dan Lemon. Oh, I was kind of close. So Dan Lemon was the overall supervisor on the previous movies. Was that your role this time?
Yeah, I was the overall soup on this one. Working with me, I had 4 amazing VFX soups that had experience with doing digital apes and history with the franchise.
So Kingdom takes place after the war for the Planet of the Apes, which was the end of Caesar's story. So what is it that made you want to come back?
I was initially approached sometime in 2019, and the reaction was kind of well, it depends where it's going to go. Because if it's just going to be tacked on, sort of, part 4 kind of thing, I don't know. But seeing the script, this is going into some interesting territory. Just the idea of what does our world look like fast forwarding many generations later. That allows us to take some liberties here and there with how we depict the world. Right? So I'd read the book, The World Without Us, right? Alan Wiseman wrote this book that was this really interesting thought experiment of what would happen if, like that, humanity just ceased to exist on the planet? How quickly would the infrastructure start failing? And you really realize how quickly the planet would just start taking back over again. With that in mind, we start thinking about, okay, well, we don't have reference for what a skyscraper would look like in 150 years or 200 years, whatever, from now. Because a lot of these materials, they haven't been around for 200 years. Part of our process on this was kind of going through the closest thing we could find. Oh, here was an old mining facility that's been sitting and left to rot. Here's an old shopping mall in Thailand that's been rapidly getting pulled back into the forest again.
How much of these cities are just sort of fabricated for the purpose of the movie versus based on real geography?
But we definitely had used some OpenStreetMaps for LA as an early starting point for some of this stuff. Not because we were trying to say it's exactly this place. And the story never says where specifically we are. The observatory that we see is not specifically Griffith, but it's like a Griffith-ish kind of place.
Yeah.
The building that we're looking at here is a building downtown LA, but it's, there's nothing left of it. It's completely covered in greenery. Wes, he's been thinking about this world for a long time now. From 2011, he did a 3D animated short called Ruin.
Wait a minute. Wait, I have seen this.
This was the short that got Wes the Maze Runner films. Look at the DNA that's on the screen here. You're going to see a lot of similarities to the world that we made. Wes really wanted to kind of start showing the evolution, I guess, if you will, of ape culture and start getting into somewhere on the trajectory between this and the Charlton Heston movies where everybody was wearing leather coats and all that stuff.
Hey guys, Jordan here. While you guys are watching React, I'm getting the studio prepped for a brand new Wren video. And our favorite shoe sponsor, Vessi, is helping me get it done. Woo! So, you already know that Vessi makes some of the most comfortable and versatile shoes that you can get. They're 100% waterproof. They're made with this patented Dymatex material that keeps your feet cool in the summer months and keeps them warm in the cooler months. They've just dropped one of the sleekest shoes I've ever seen them make. They're lightweight, they're breathable, they slip on and off, and they're comfortable. Being in a shoe that can carry me through my chaotic lifestyle is a game changer. I no longer have to bring multiple pairs of shoes when I come into work. The shoes that I have on my feet, these Courtside Classics, they're fashionable enough to where I can go around the city with my friends and still look super cute, but also they're light enough to where they're not weighing me down. And if it happens to rain later, I don't need to bring a pair of rain boots. These are 100% waterproof. And I feel confident painting chroma green in them because, well, if I get paint on them, then I just wash it off.
Look at that.
Just like new. And that's why you say yesy to Vessi. So if you need a shoe that can match your chaotic lifestyle, head over to vessi.com/corridorcrew to get 15% off. Check out those Courtside Classics or all of their other fantastic shoes that they have. Anyways, I have a green screen to paint, so I'm gonna hop back into my Vessis and you guys hop back into React. See you next time.
So like one of my favorite things about the sort of Eagle Clan village is the fact that these towers are old like power line towers. At first I was like, why did they make these strange towers out of wood so tall? But then I was like, oh, it's because they actually have a framework of iron girders in it.
You're always reminded that this used to be a human civilization. You know, there's just little bits and pieces, hints of it left. The big thing here, again, was just this has to look real, guys.
Yeah.
It has to look organic. As I'm sure you guys are aware, like trying to do that stuff is some of the hardest things you can do in computer graphics. You need to make sure that we got wind in the trees and all the little ferns and grasses just have this life to them, that the apes have little flutters of wind in their fur every now and then just to kind of help tie them into the world. This shot, the sound mixer couldn't believe that the tree that was on the right of frame there he thought it was just a plate that we were tying this stuff into.
I did too. Yes,
like,
that tree stands out.
This shot right here, I was like, yeah, the apes are really impressive. But then when it cut to the clean plate, I was like, okay, nice little clean plate. But then the gray render went over it, and I was just like,
It's the motion of it. Like the motion is perfect.
I mean, that's my favorite tree in the movie right there. Like it just...
I thought I was weird for liking it so much. Like right out the gate when we see these characters, there's already a lot more interaction with clothing. Like everyone's wearing something now.
It starts informing to the audience something about the culture that they're coming from. And we approached this a very similar way as we did with the Avatar movies and stuff, where we actually had Weta Workshop actually built physical samples of these pieces of the weaving and like the feather work and all that beautiful stuff. It just instantly gives Wes and the costume designer and the filmmaking team something tactile that they can look at instead of trying to make those decisions from a rough sketch or something. It just brings that reality to it.
So you've talked about bringing life to the world, but talk about bringing life to these ape characters using performance capture.
There are three kind of distinct mocap systems that we use on the movie. There's passive. That's just a mocap stage. That's where you got, the cameras are each emitting infrared light and the retroreflective markers bounce it back to the cameras. That's what we've been using since Lord of the Rings. The active is what we kind of brought to the mix on Rise. We could actually have the actors emit light instead of reflect light. And it allowed us to go out onto location and actually get the performances that really kind of turned the page in terms of what we could do with performance capture. For Kingdom, this is kind of the third generation of performance capture. This shot, you can see the mix of both of the suits. So Sarah Wiseman playing Dar, who's Noah's mother, and Owen Teague playing Noah. Sarah has got the previous generation of the suit on where the strands are actually stuck to the outside of the suit. Owen is wearing the third generation. In the new version, we've actually embedded the strands inside the suit so they can't get snagged on something. The markers that they're wearing, the optical markers, that's for a process that we call FOCAP, where we're still capturing them, but we're capturing them via witness cameras instead of mocap cameras.
Right, meaning someone would need to use those witness cameras to match move a 3D skeleton to the motion of the actor, rather than the data automatically being applied to a 3D skeleton.
It's a more laborious process to reassemble all that stuff at the end of the day. For obvious reasons, we're trying to do mocap as much as we can. But for scenes where we know we were going to be there for like a one setup and then we're going to move over here again, typically we would say, well, we'll just do FOCAP for this one. It was also like a fail-safe kind of method because we were always running witness cameras on every setup.
I mean, speaking of performance, Raka's performance was my favorite in the entire thing.
She follows you from your village.
And what amazed me was the fidelity of the facial animation. It was feeding comedy. Like, it was getting laughs based on subtle eye flaring. And it was all rooted in facial animation. It was selling comedy.
I definitely noticed this is the best hair and fur I've ever seen digital. Like, it feels more dense, more real, but you also get a little bit more of like the little strands, like the little stragglers sticking out, like the frizz, especially on Raka.
Yeah, the orangutans are always the most fun / the most terror in terms of just because they're the hairiest characters. The thing that was great about Raka is there was a particular face that Wes particularly loved for Raka. We've actually found that orangutan who is in a zoo in Wuppertal, Germany. We discovered that the shaggy hair that we see going over his brow actually starts like back here. It's like a big.
I noticed it. Yeah, it's like a comb over.
Yeah, it's like a big orangutan comb over, which then plays in really well in a scene later on when he gets wet.
The water dripping off his beard.
I know,
Dude.
it's so good.
Dude.
It's so good.
That's a wet ape.
We had beautiful reference of orangutans taking a bath or pouring buckets over their head or whatever. The end result is just...
I mean, that frame right there is one of the greatest visual effects achievements in my mind in history.
I had to literally like physically yank that shot out of Winter's hands. Like the team just would not stop making it better. It's perfect. The director finaled it 2 days ago, guys. It's okay, fine. I'll concede. This looks even better now. But okay, but really, but stop. It's, nice work, guys.
Nice work. The water effects in this film are remarkable, which is to be expected from Weta FX at this point, especially after Way of Water. Like, the water stuff is fantastic.
Avatar 2 was in production at Weta. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, was that in parallel or did that come after Avatar?
We overlapped a bit.
A little bit,
yeah.
okay.
So our prep was during their final crunch. We probably spent a good 3/4 of a year, if not more, just figuring out the approach we were taking. They came up with really beautiful ways to sort of run a big river simulation for the whole thing. You're tracking the state of every particle at every point, and is this particle part of the bulk fluid? Is this particle now foam? Is it aeration? Is it mist or is it spray? But it's never as simple as push a button, sim comes out. It's all about control. And so I kept giving the note, like, I'm not seeing enough foam, more foam, more foam, more foam. At that point, it becomes easier to then run a secondary simulation on top of that to give you the foam back.
When we're talking about the scale of these water effects and the amount of data that we're talking about, millions upon millions of particles that are being meshed together and interacting with each other and converting back to volumetric state, and it's a whole big ordeal, and they're massive files. So for something like this, what kind of scale are we looking at?
The river, just the river sequence, I think the number I had seen was 1.2 petabytes.
Over a petabyte?
Over a petabyte.
That's 1,000 terabytes.
Yes.
1,000 terabytes.
Yeah. For the river simulations in the river scene by itself, just that. Yeah. No, I think the insane number that our data managers had quoted was we had, from the start to the finish of this production, we ended up generating and deleting like 44 petabytes worth of data. You can't wrap your mind around how much data that is.
Where the heck do you put it?
Floppy disks.
Yeah.
Floppy disks.
A lot of floppy disks.
And CDs.
Yeah.
Flip fluids, man. They're dangerous.
Yeah.
Watch yourselves. We were talking to Guy Williams a while back. He was telling us feathers are the hardest thing.
They're
very difficult.
They're wickedly tough.
Well, it's a good thing you don't have a bunch of characters that have tons of feathers in this movie.
I know, it sure is. It was a big relief that we didn't have to do eagles or something like that.
Thank God.
In the lead up to the movie, that was one of the things that came up. It's like, how we placed on birds, guys, because we've got a few of those to do. And obviously, conveniently, we had done the Peacemaker Eagly character.
Oh, yeah.
And so there was definitely a jumping off point that we could take for this film of not having to kind of figure the whole thing out from scratch again. I mean, we'd done the hawk in Mulan. The birds are always wickedly challenging in the sense of every one of those feathers is not just a piece of geometry. It's like, it's the raucous with barbs, and the barbs have barbules.
And they're all stacked.
Exactly, and they have to like sit on top of each other and collide with each other, but how do you work through collisions on something with that much geometric complexity and all these kind of things? The thing that has to go hand in hand with how it looks is how it moves. And so we'd actually gotten in contact with a bird handler in Melbourne who came up to Sydney and actually brought an Australian wedge-tailed eagle for the cast, so they could actually walk around with an eagle on their arm. But it gave us, obviously, a gold mine of reference. And it was through that process that we really could see what happens when the bird's coming into land and starts flaring those wings, and you really start to get the turbulence breaking up over the leading edge of the wings and how much the feathers flutter. The animation team, between Paul and John and our animators that worked on these eagles, they just did such a beautiful job of not making them act, right?
Yeah,
These were not, Disney characters. I guess technically they are Disney characters, but we weren't trying to anthropomorphize the birds.
They need to be birds.
Yes,
they need to be wild
just need to,
animals.
It needs to look like documentary footage and not a performance. This movie, we had a director who's our people, we had a director who spoke our language, we had a director who had his roots in 3D animation. It certainly makes every conversation easier. We can talk in real terms about how we're going to achieve this and why we want to do it this way instead of that way. We all realized we were working on something really special.
I mean, and the results are fantastic. So you guys should be very proud.
Everyone, you gotta see this movie. I cannot recommend it enough. Erik, thank you so much for joining us on the couch. You had a lot of inside stories that I would have never known outside of this show, so thank you.
And I didn't even tell you about the leeches.
Turn off the camera, he's gonna tell us about the leeches. Turn off the camera.